Yeah, our CBS News partners revealing some new GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, tracking the movements of the boat Nolan Wells was on before he disappeared July.
For 2 weeks, one name has held more significance than almost anything else in the Nolan investigation, exactly because so little was understood about the individual connected to it. A name lacking a complete backstory. Two individuals were alongside Nolan Wells during his last verified moments on Horn Island. Nolan's companions and a young lady they strictly called by her given name. For nearly a fortnight, one of those two versions remained almost completely hidden from public sight, while the other was echoed so often it began to resemble absolute truth. Today, that shifts because what Katie claims occurred does not align with what his companions have stated to investigators, and a family that has already suffered the loss of their son must now endure the thought that someone somewhere in this narrative isn't being honest with them. Consider what that implies for two parents who have passed every single day since the 4th of July, attempting to comprehend how their child's holiday excursion concluded the way it did. It is not sufficient for them to just learn what occurred. They must learn who they can rely on to inform them. There is more awaiting you today. Tracked GPS coordinates indicating precisely where a vessel traveled hour by hour on the afternoon Nolan vanished. A log that doesn't mind anyone's emotions or allegiances, only what genuinely transpired. A grand jury currently officially active, taking this investigation somewhere it has never reached prior. And a collection of minor peculiar details his very parents still cannot comprehend. Details that have absolutely nothing to do with internet gossip or viral videos and everything to do with what genuinely transpired on a barrier island near the shoreline of Mississippi. Prior to starting, a brief notice. This investigation focuses on the passing of a young man. So, if that is a difficult subject for you today, please look after yourself as we proceed. And if you wish to track this investigation as it unfolds, click subscribe right now and inform us in the comments where you are watching from today, because a family out there is wishing the correct individual watches this and recalls a detail they haven't disclosed yet. Let us begin with the name that required 2 weeks to emerge and the dread that arrived connected to it. Nolan engaged in a chat with a young lady on the shore. His companions would subsequently call her solely as Katie. That is where the verified details ended for an extended period. Katie's identity was not included in the initial wave of reporting. It was not in the preliminary remarks from the family's attorneys. While internet theorizing hunted down pool gatherings and out-of-context video segments, the single individual who might have conversed with Nolan last remained almost entirely unnamed, oblivious. Most probably that her identity would ultimately mean this much to individuals she had never encountered. A portion of the cause points back to the very initial evening he vanished. An evening that for his mom must have seemed like it extended on endlessly. Based on someone who was speaking with Christine Wansley as she attempted to locate where her boy was, Katie's name slipped into the chat almost accidentally, brought up as someone Nolan had desired to remain behind alongside. And then arrived a detail that rendered an already horrifying evening significantly worse. A rumor that Katie herself might be missing too, with no one on that line capable of stating who she genuinely was or where to even commence searching for her. Visualize that moment for a minute. A mom already hunting for one lost child, unexpectedly informed there might be two. No identity to connect to the additional concern. No phone number to dial. Merely more dread piled on top of dread that already had no place left to escape. That specific concern proved to be groundless. Katie was never lost. She had departed the island securely that afternoon on a separate vessel and had been contactable the whole time. Verification of that arrived not from law enforcement and not from Nolan's companions, but from her own mom, Gracie McCormick, who shared publicly to rectify the narrative once rumors regarding her child started circulating online in manners she never anticipated. Based on McCormick, her child was present on Horn Island that afternoon, hung out with Nolan, and the pair separated ways sometime that midday. She states her child has zero awareness of anything that occurred to him subsequently. She bid farewell to him. She boarded a separate vessel. She returned to a mom who had no clue at the moment that her child's name would shortly rest at the core of one of the most discussed investigations in the nation. If that were the entire narrative, it would conclude there peacefully, the way most minor footnotes in a massive tragedy usually conclude. It does not, because lawyer Ben Crump, acting for the Wells family, states Katie's version of that last chat is detailed and hasn't faltered, and it clashes directly with what Nolan's companions have stated. Based on Katie, Nolan stated to her he was intending to reunite with his companions and return to their vessel prior to them departing the island. Based on the companions themselves, Nolan stated to them the reverse, that he planned to remain behind on the island alongside Katie completely by his own decision in his own words. Both claims cannot be correct. One of these two versions is incorrect. And somewhere beneath that singular word, incorrect, resides a family who must endure not figuring out which one it is. If Katie's account stands up, then something occurred in the gap between Nolan expressing his plan to depart and the vessel actually leaving without his presence. Something disrupted whatever scheme he held. No one has clarified what. If the companion's account stands up, then Nolan made a purposeful, conscious decision to stay alone on an isolated barrier island while his sole transport home left without his presence. Which brings up an entirely separate question regarding what occurred to him in the time frame that ensued. Solitary without the crew he had passed the entire day alongside. This is not a hypothesis pulled from a reply section or an assertion constructed on guesswork. It is a direct contradiction between two individuals who were both present, recalling Nolan's final documented phrasing in two manners that simply cannot be harmonized with one another. And currently, as of this broadcast, nobody, not the relatives, not the detectives, not anyone holding the power to declare for sure, has settled it. Nolan's parents are left holding two accounts of their child's final decision, incapable of figuring out which one is genuine. There is a specific type of ache in that distinct ambiguity, one that is separate from mourning itself. Mourning, awful as it is, at least carries a form. It is the absence of an individual you cared for. But this is something different, the absence of even figuring out your own child's final choice. Did he decide to remain, or did he plan to return home? For most households, that would be a simple thing to resolve. Pieced together from a dozen minor confirmations that never even show up as significant until they are required. For the Wyosley household, it has turned into the single most difficult unresolved query in their child's whole investigation, and no one has been capable of handing them a genuine resolution yet. Now, apart from that chat, there are smaller discrepancies the household has brought up publicly. The sort of details that would never create a headline by themselves, but that gather significance the longer you reflect on them. Begin with something as basic and as simple to ignore as an item of clothing. The formal police document records Nolan sporting black shorts at the moment of his vanishing. But based on Christine Wansley, a young lady who was present on the island that afternoon, subsequently reached out and provided pictures with her displaying Nolan in blue shorts, not black. On its own, it sounds like nothing. A clerical error, a misremembered fact, but attempt to view it the way a mom views it. A mom who no longer possesses the capacity to simply ask her child what he was sporting that afternoon, or why or where he traveled subsequently. For her, that fact isn't a footnote to skip past. It is a string. And once you start tugging on one string in an investigation constructed almost completely on other people's recollections, you cannot avoid looking for the subsequent one. Then there is what occurred prior to Nolan's remains being even discovered. While his parents were still clinging to optimism, still half anticipating a phone ring that would conclude this horror with comfort instead of mourning. They traveled to retrieve his vehicle from a companion's driveway, a chore that should have consumed minutes. Based on the family, it became unexpectedly challenging. A companion arrived to the doorway stating he couldn't locate the key. He walked back indoors to search again. Minutes elapsed. Sort of minutes that appear infinite. You are standing on someone else's patio, waiting with your lost child somewhere out there, no method to. Ultimately, the keys showed up exactly where another individual overheard on a phone ring happened to state they had been the whole duration sitting on top spot. For a household already desperate for anything resembling a direct answer, a holdup like that doesn't appear as a coincidence. It appears as resistance, showing up at the precise instant they needed things to be straightforward. And then there is Nolan's cellular device. Based on a family companion who assisted in tracking the gadget down utilizing a surveillance application, Nolan uploaded to Snapchat nearly every single day. The sort of routine so steady it barely showed up as a routine at all until it halted. In the 24 hours prior to him vanishing, that action went completely quiet. No posts, no updates. A quietness that everyone near to him concurs was simply not typical for him. When the gadget was ultimately found, one additional discrepancy emerged. The location linked to the profile didn't even match the spot where the cellular device itself was eventually discovered. Think about what it must be like to sit with that specific fact as a parent. Nolan's digital existence had been, by every account, an open ledger, the sort of constant casual recording so usual among individuals his age that no one thinks twice regarding it. And then, for exactly the block of time that counts most, it goes silent. Not slowly, not with caution, just quietness. In the 24-hour span, his family would trade almost anything to comprehend. It is easy, observing from the exterior, to view a detail like that as a hint in the way a detective book views a hint, something with a clear reason waiting just around the bend. For Nolan's parents, it isn't that simple. It is one additional piece of their child's final day that doesn't act the way the remainder of his existence did, and they don't possess the privilege of viewing it as a narrative device. They must live with it as an unresolved question permanently until somebody provides them a genuine explanation. None of these details viewed separately tell us precisely what occurred to Nolan Wells, but combined, based on the individuals who cared for him most, they are the rationale. This household states they cannot simply accept the formal narrative as absolute, and why they persist evening after evening to pose questions no one has completely addressed yet. While all of this has been progressing in the background, the discrepancies, the minor unexplained facts, the quiet effort of detectives attempting to rebuild a single afternoon, Nolan's household has also had to perform something no parent should ever have to prepare for. Bid farewell. Christine Wansley declared that her child's homegoing memorial would be hosted on Monday, July the 20th, at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, the very community that watched Nolan mature, play football, and grow into the young man his mentors and teammates detail with such uniformity. A location that formerly cheered his signing day now must prepare to lay him to rest. And it is worth recalling beneath every headline and every bit of tracked data that this is still essentially a household mourning a child in front of an audience of millions they never requested. That is part of why correctness counts so much here. Every fact in this investigation is being consumed not simply by strangers online, but by two parents who will bear whatever gets spoken about their child for the remainder of their existence. They don't get to step away from this narrative once it stops trending. They reside inside it constantly now. And the only thing anyone observing can truly provide them is caution in how their child's narrative gets shared. If you wish to stay updated with every verified update in this investigation as it happens, subscribe right now, because what we are discussing next isn't founded on anyone's recollection or anyone's statement or anyone's version of events at all. It is founded entirely on tracked data, the one portion of this narrative that cannot be molded by mourning or loyalty or dread. Here is what the GPS log displays. At 9:56 in the morning on July 4th, the vessel holding Nolan and his companions departed its dock, commencing a day that nobody on board could have guessed would conclude the way it did. By 11:14, it had arrived at Horn Island. For multiple hours subsequently, the party remained together, observing the holiday the way so many others were doing that exact afternoon along that exact stretch of shoreline. At 4:31 that afternoon, based on data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the vessel departed Horn Island. Nolan was not aboard. It returned to its initial dock, and then instead of remaining there for the evening, it continued moving. At 5:52 p.m., the vessel traveled into Fort Bayou. By 6:06, it was back at the dock once more. Subsequently that evening, at 7:19 p.m., the vessel's tracked location shifted one additional time to the Fort Bayou boat launch. From there, based on the Marine Resources document, it was removed from the water completely and transported over land, likely towed by an automobile to a property in Biloxi owned by the vessel's proprietors. Sit with that timeline. 4 distinct movements logged automatically after the instant Nolan was left behind. Not one straightforward boat journey home, but a series of halts across multiple hours, concluding on land over 70 miles from where the day commenced. That timeline, tracked without any input from anybody linked to this investigation, is the exact window detectives are currently laboring to fully clarify, and the exact window Nolan's parents replay in their heads repeatedly, looking for what could have occurred inside it. Now to where the formal procedure stands and what has shifted most lately for a household that has passed weeks waiting for anyone in a role of power to simply sit down and speak to them directly. On July the 15th, Nolan's parents did exactly that. Christine and Elmore Wanley sat down face-to-face with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. Their initial direct session with her department since Nolan's remains were discovered on Horn Island. Lawyer Ben Crump detailed the session subsequently as polite and honest, a minor but significant shift after over a week of feeling like they were on the exterior of their own child's investigation. And out of that session arrived confirmation that once the DA's probe concludes, its results will proceed to a grand jury. That phrase usually carries more emotional significance than it genuinely holds. So it is worth being exact here, both for the purpose of correctness and for the purpose of a household who has already had their narrative twisted enough. A grand jury submission is not a ruling. It is not a formal charge against any specific individual. It does not indicate charges have already been submitted, and it does not indicate detectives have determined a crime occurred. What it indicates specifically is that the investigation has reached a procedural point where its results will be formally evaluated to decide whether charges are justified at all. It is a mechanism, a procedure, progress, but not an ending. And this household understands better than anybody the distinction between those two phrases. Crump also utilized the moment to rectify something that had spread broadly online, the assertion that the FBI had essentially seized control of this probe. Based on a formal statement from FBI Jackson, the Bureau has aided Jackson County detectives with specific aspects of the investigation largely focused on threats issued against individuals linked to the probe, threats that crossed state borders and thus fell under federal authority. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the primary agency throughout from the very initial search to whatever arrives next. The FBI's participation has been assistance, not authority. And then there is Nolan's cellular device, the piece of proof his household has highlighted from almost the very start as something that could carry genuine answers regarding his final hours. A tiny object that has somehow grown to hold the significance of an entire family's urge to comprehend what occurred to their child. Think regarding that for a minute. A gadget small enough to slip in a pocket, normal in every manner, currently sitting at the core of a grand jury submission, an FBI-aided threat probe, and a mom's final wish for comprehending her child's final hours. That is an immense amount of significance to place on something so tiny. But for a household with almost nothing else left to grasp onto, it has turned into one of the sole concrete items they possess. At the July 15th press event, both parties consented to something new, a collaborative inspection with specialists acting for the family operating alongside specialists linked to the formal investigation, analyzing the gadget collectively instead of individually, comparing discoveries in real time instead of issuing competing remarks after the event. Lawyer Eric Hertz is managing that endeavor on the family's behalf, operating with former law enforcement professionals brought in specifically for the technical effort involved. As of this broadcast, that inspection has not yet occurred. The family is currently waiting the way they have been waiting in one shape or another since the evening their child didn't return home, waiting for a search, waiting for a medical examiner, waiting for an autopsy, waiting for a session with the district attorney, and currently waiting for a cellular device. Each portion of this investigation has arrived slowly on its individual schedule, and each time this household has had zero option but to wait for it. Before we wrap up today, two portions of this investigation warrant a rapid, direct fix because both of them circulated broadly and both of them influenced what individuals assumed regarding Nolan's passing long prior to anyone actually verifying whether they were accurate. The initial involved a picture. A visual of Nolan at a pool gathering started spreading online after his remains were discovered, and for a brief, confusing span of time, a substantial number of individuals genuinely assumed it demonstrated he had been living after July 4th. Somewhere out there, strangers were posting a picture and secretly wishing it indicated Nolan Wells wasn't truly gone. Optimism that a mourning household had to observe spread, understanding it wasn't accurate and having to state so publicly repeatedly it wasn't accurate. Rolling Stone verified through image data and a statement from his companion Tristan Shepard that the picture had genuinely been captured on June the 27th, an entire week prior to Nolan ever traveling to Horn Island. It had simply been posted online on July the 5th, which is what created the misunderstanding regarding its timing in the first instance. The secondary involved a clip. Many assumed it caught Nolan in a dispute shortly before he disappeared. Viewing the clip online as though it were the absent piece of the entire investigation, Shepard spoke to that one directly too. The tone on the clip, he verified, was his own, not Nolan's. Both pieces of false information have since been rectified publicly and plainly. What remains once you strip them both away is what was always beneath them from the very start. The timeline, the unsettled contradiction between two direct accounts in a household currently waiting calmly and publicly for somebody to provide them genuine answers instead of hypotheses. This investigation is currently active. It stays in every manner incomplete. The grand jury hasn't decided anything yet. The phone inspection consented to weeks prior still hasn't occurred. And the contradiction between Katie's account and the account provided by Nolan's companion still hasn't been settled by anybody with the genuine power to settle it. What we have presented today isn't guesswork, and it isn't the account of this narrative that circulated fastest online. It is what has genuinely been verified by name, by document, by confirmed reporting as of today. And it is in numerous ways the bare minimum a mourning household warrants. Not another hypothesis, not another gossip, simply the reality as far as it is presently understood, shared with the caution this narrative has always demanded. Somewhere in Ocean Springs tonight, a mom is organizing a memorial for a child she still doesn't completely understand losing. A dad is currently replaying a driveway, a set of missing keys, a phone ring he overheard, and a young lady named Katie, who never requested to become a piece of a national narrative, is enduring the realization that her final chat with Nolan Wells has turned into one of the most examined conversations in the nation. Even though by every account, she has done nothing apart from tell detectives what she recalls, that is the portion of this narrative that is simple to lose beneath the grand jury phrasing and the GPS timestamps and the legal wording. Beneath all of it, there is still simply a household in a small Mississippi town attempting to comprehend how a holiday boat excursion with companions concluded with their child gone. Nothing regarding a grand jury submission alters that. Nothing regarding a collaborative phone inspection alters that. Those are stages, significant ones, but they are stages toward an explanation this household hasn't acquired yet. If this presented the investigation more plainly than what you have observed elsewhere, forward it to someone who has been tracking the narrative and inform us in the comments which unresolved query you believe counts most presently. The chat on the shore, the GPS timeline, or one of the minor facts this household still cannot clarify. We will return with the subsequent verified update the instant there is one, because somewhere in Mississippi a household is currently waiting for the reality regarding that evening, and they warrant to have it shared correctly without guesswork, without skips, and without anything attached that isn't genuinely known.